Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you've all had a fantastic day so far for SharePoint Saturday Warsaw. It's a shame we can't do it in person, but obviously the times that we are, it's been a really good day just being able to do all of this online. So I'm just so happy it's all still gone ahead. And that couldn't have happened without the team. So a heartfelt thanks to the team that have put this together. And don't forget that we are still trying to do this later on in the year, so we can actually celebrate the 5th anniversary of SPS Warsaw together. So fingers crossed that will be on, and we'll be able to all have an actual SharePoint rather than just a virtual SharePoint like what we've got later on. So thank you to those guys. Also, thank you to the sponsors and partners. So without these guys, none of this is really able to take place. They're obviously here to support us. So if you can give them some love, especially when they do reach out to you after the sessions, then please do give them some love. So what I'm talking about today is Microsoft Forms and what's called the hidden gem, what I call the hidden gem of Office 365. Now, before I get into that, it's probably best to introduce myself. So my name is Matt Weston. I'm a Microsoft 365 consultant from the United Kingdom. I'm the managing director of a small company called Vantage 365, but I spend as much time as possible doing things in the community, so running user groups, blogging, vlogging, and as a result, I was awarded the Power Automate MVP at the start of February. I'm also a Flownaut, so I help out on the Flow community or the Power Automate community whenever I can. And I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, so I like getting my hands dirty with the technical side. I am a shameless self-promoter, so after this, if you have any further questions, if you want to give any feedback or just keep in touch, please feel free to reach out on Twitter. LinkedIn or my blog and YouTube channel is also up there as well, and I'll repeat that at the end. So what we're actually going to be going through over the next 45 minutes or so is looking at what is Microsoft Forms. Now, I very much like Microsoft Forms, even though I come from a developer background, I do a lot of Power Apps, but I also really like Forms for the product that it is. And I'll share some of the reasons why I really like this as we go through. We'll look at the use cases for the key areas that you can really meet by using Microsoft Forms, as well as using the actual product and when you should use it over some of the other options that you have available to you in Office 365. What I really want to show is where this integrates with other areas of Office 365. So we're not just dealing with single products anymore, we're dealing with a jigsaw of different applications that all fit together to form a single solution. So I'm going to share some of the places where Forms can really be utilized elsewhere. And then we'll have a very quick look at Forms Pro and just see what the difference is between the premium version and what you get with your Office 365 licenses. As we go through, do feel free to put questions into chat. I'll be closing my presentation down as quickly as possible so I'll be able to see chat again. But I will break as well for questions, so please do feel free to answer them. So the first thing then is, let's talk a little bit about Microsoft Forms in general. So Forms was only released to the enterprise licenses probably within the last 12 to 18 months. It was always predominantly an education application, and it came across from the Edge licenses into the full enterprise suite. It's not just available in the enterprise licenses. Any Office 365 license from Business Essentials right the way up to Microsoft 365 E5 all have the ability to take advantage of what Microsoft Forms is. And what it is just a very, very simple data capture tool. It's so lightweight, it's so simple. For me, it's one of those things that I can just give to any user regardless of IT competence, so I don't need to rely on IT pros, and they can go ahead and they can create something that's quite useful for their particular needs. And there are two things that we can create with Microsoft Forms. We can create forms, and they are designed just to be data capture tools. So capture information from a user. It's all very, very one-way piece of traffic. Very, very simple forms, although we can add a little bit more complexity to our forms now than what we have been able to in the past. And I'll show you where you can really start to build that out when we get to the demos. But it's also very much a useful tool if I need to get information into my Office 365 tenancy from external users. So I have the ability to send a form out anonymously for people to fill in without having any Office 365 licenses themselves, without having to authenticate against my environment first of all in order to come and fill that in. And so therefore I can capture information, I can bring that in, and then I can process it in a way that I see fit. So the other aspect of forms is the ability to create a quiz. Now, the first time that whenever I say to a potential client, oh, you can create a quiz with Microsoft Forms, they just tend to look at me a little bit confused, going, well, why would we want to create a quiz? So if I was to put this into a bit of a business context where I've used it, a quiz can be used for testing. That could be what I've done in the past is have it as part of my interview process, and I've used it for technical testing. I use it as part of my training sessions when I conduct training on Teams, as an example, for confirmation of understanding. Or what's completely off the wall is that I'll do my company Christmas quiz on there as well. But the difference is with a quiz is that we can assign point weightings, and we can actually get a score back at the end of that quiz being completed. So it allows us to actually have a piece of feedback for the end users to see how well they've done. And again, we'll see a little bit more of that when we actually get into the demo. But everything that I've just described so far probably could be, well, no probably about it, it could be achieved using Microsoft Power Apps. So quite often the question that I get asked is, well, Matt, so when would I use forms over Power Apps? And that's where I tend to really bring this slide out, because this tries to highlight some of the key differences. So both Microsoft Power Apps and Microsoft Forms are probably very easy to get started with, to do some very basic work with. But whereas Microsoft Forms has a very shallow learning curve because it's very restricted in terms of what you can do. It's literally what you see on the screen is what you get. Compare that to Power Apps, where you actually need to create logic and position controls and make the interactions between them. You find that Power Apps has a very steep learning curve. So as a result of that learning curve, Power Apps tends to shut itself off from certain parts of the IT audience, whereas Forms is very much an all-user tool. Forms is a fairly static design. So if you don't want to necessarily worry about the consistency of the look and feel of the forms, then Forms is the way to go, because it's generally they all look and feel the same. You can apply some basic theming, but beyond that, the radio buttons are always look the same. They have the same spacing. The text boxes and all the labels around them all have the same font. So there's no, whilst there's no flexibility, there's also a good use case there for having a consistent approach for all of them. Again, compare that to Power Apps, when you have full control over everything that goes onto a canvas, and you have to worry about the styling of each piece. And if things don't line up quite right, then you can spend a lot of time trying to make that happen. Where Power Apps does have the advantage is that you can use a lot of dynamic content. So for example, if I have an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of data in there, I can pull that into my Power App, and then I can use that to help drive my user interaction. I don't have the ability to do that with Forms. I can define lists, but they are very static within the actual forms themselves. But the big winner for Forms is it can accept external responses without additional licenses. Now, Power Apps, when they're presented, for example, through a SharePoint site, can be accessed by guest users, as long as the guests have an Office 365 and therefore Power Apps license assigned to them from their own side. If they don't, then they won't see a form at all. So Forms has the ability to be a little bit more flexible and be more available to a larger audience. So that's really an introduction in terms of what Forms is and generally how it's what it's designed for. Let's actually go and have a look at how we create things in there. So Forms is accessible from obviously the Microsoft Office 365 portal homepage or from the waffle. So I can go and click on that, and what that will do is that will load up Microsoft Forms. Now, by default, as part of your Office 365 license, you have Microsoft, the basic Microsoft Forms offering. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about Forms Pro later on. But what I have the ability to see here is I have the ability to create a new form and a new quiz. I also have shared with me, so if people have shared a form with me to collaborate on, then I can see those there. And I also have the capability to associate a form with an Office 365 group. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that's a really good thing to do when we've actually created a form later on. So I'm going to create myself a form to start off with. And oops, my token's timed out. Let's go and create a form. And so this is my editing canvas. It really is as simple as I click in to where I want to put some text, and then I start typing. So I'm going to call this my SPS Warsaw feedback. And I can add descriptions. I can also add media. So I can add an image in here. So if I go and find a picture for Warsaw, I can use Bing search and it will go away and find pictures for me. I can use OneDrive to pull additional media in, or I can upload something directly from my OneDrive. So let's go and add that into my form. So I then have, so I've now got a title, I've got a picture. Where a form really starts to add the value is the fact that I can start to now ask questions. And it really is as simple as going to add new. And I have a number of data types available to me. So I've got the basic ones that you would expect from a form. I've got a choice, and a choice can be, have you attended SPS before? But one of the really nice things that's coming through with forms now is that they are starting to build more intelligence into the actual editing experience. So, for example, it's recognized this as being a closed question. And so it's suggesting options that I potentially could want to put in there. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the latest releases later on about how that intelligence is also evolving. And if I want to say yes, and I want to add no, and so therefore it's given me the ability to go and create that question quite quickly. I can define whether it's one answer or whether it's multiple answers, and also whether it's required. Let's go and add another question. Now, obviously, I've got some quite obvious ones here. I've got text, I've got ratings, so I can rate something from 1 to 5. So how do you rate the session? And again, I can make it required or not. But what I tend to try and show on these types of sessions is that I can have the basic data types in there. But if I click on the drop down, I've actually got some quite advanced things that I can do in my form. So for example, I can do rankings. Let's go and add a ranking option on there. And that allows me to specify rank these in order of your favorite. We can type in SharePoint, and type Teams, and let's put forms in there as well. And then that question, without me having to do any other configuration, will allow my users to drag and drop, move up and down to give an ordering to the answers in terms of the precedence that they see being the most relevant. What else have we got? I've got Likert. Now, Likert's one of these that people go, I've never heard of that before. But as soon as I actually put it on the screen, you'll recognize it as being one of those questionnaires that you answer where you have a statement and you specify whether it's whether I strongly agree, whether I agree. Oh, there we go. It's actually now recognizing what I want. And let's put neutral on the end. Okay, so I can start to build out those Likert questions really simply. All I have to do is just type on the screen. And then the final one, which is worthwhile pointing out for now, is the Net Promoter Score. So NPS is one of those feedback options which allows us to take, basically ask the question, would you recommend us to your friend? This is quite a common scale now, quite a common feedback mechanism to find out how good a job have we done? Have we done a good enough job that you'd actually recommend us to your friend? Or do we actually need to go and work on something? And the result of actually of that being filled in will then categorize the users who have filled this in as either being those that are positive, or those that are being negative or neutral towards your organization. So that allows you, when you start to look at the responses, to maybe target some of your customer relations teams to go and speak to those customers that have given it a more negative rating, or maybe target some of your marketing at those that are strongly on side so that you can maybe approach them for more business. So there's a lot of power there for you to go and create these some quite interactive and quite responsive forms without having to write any code whatsoever and just literally going through a configuration. What is pretty new to forms is that I can also now add the ability to upload a file. So I could be asking questions all the way through, and then the final question might be upload some evidence or upload a screenshot or something else that really is relevant to this form. There is a slight limitation around the upload file though. It will only work for internal users. So if you make this an anonymous form and send it out, you won't be able to use this. But if you were to use this internally, so for example, if you are using this for fault reporting, then you can ask people to upload a picture as a result of this and then feed that into your form. And that gets saved in the OneDrive of the person who creates the form. So you might then have a little bit of work to do to go and grab that file and push it somewhere else, but at least it gets stored somewhere that you can then share it with other people. What we also have when we're creating our questions is the ability to create sections. So sections are very important because it could be that if I've got 100 questions, having just one massive screen full of 100 questions is something that's quite daunting to your end users. So you can break it down into specific sections. So my first section might be basic information. And then let's go for what we see on most forms now, which is equality and diversity. And then we can ask some basic questions around E&D. So what age group are you? And let's go for 18 to 25 or 18 to 15 even. Let's go for 26 to 35. And let's add one more in there, and let's go for. Okay, so we can break out into different sections. So we're building our form, we're breaking out into sections. It's worthwhile being able to do some testing on this before we actually launch this out to our users. And all the while that we're going through this, I can preview. And the preview allows me to do a couple of things. It allows me to view it as it would be seen on a computer. So I can scroll down and I can actually go and fill these in if I need to. You can see here that it breaks at question 5 and then has a next button. So if I click next, it then goes across to the next page and has my equality diversity questions. So I can then ask for the next lot of questions before I finish the form and ask them to submit. I can also look at how it appears on a mobile, because without having to do anything, and just like other areas of Microsoft 365, it's very much mobile responsive. So all of my questions, all of my data types will automatically scale to be working on a mobile. So you can see here, I've got my rankings, I've got my statements. So for statement 1, I strongly agree. For statement 2, I agree. And then again, I can upload my file. So it's always worthwhile doing that little bit of work in the preview to go and have a look at how it looks before you publish it. But so far, my form looks quite bland, really. I think we can do something to make this look a little bit nicer. And I have some theming options. When I click on theme, it will suggest some options with some pre-built themes, which I can then select, and it'll apply a background, it'll apply colors, and so on. Let me hide that for a moment, because what I can do is go and create my own. And if I click on Customize Theme, I have an upload image, and I also have a Customize Color option. What is relatively new around this is that if I go and select a picture, and I'm just going to use image search from here, let's go and add that. It will apply a background. And if it's if there's a specific background color, and I've seen this hit and miss a little bit, it will also apply a color directly to your form for you. It's not worked in this case, so let's go and apply one. Let's go for black, because black's the only one I can ever remember in hex color. And so now let's click back. So if I scroll down now, basically all it will do is just change various parts of my form to be my primary color, so black. So that's the header and also any buttons that you'll see on there. So not very many options around what I can do in terms of styling the form, but enough to give it that little bit of brand identity, but still in the confines of having a consistent look and approach to all of our forms. So that's our theming. Let's have a look at some of the other things that I can do to make my form a little bit more interactive. If I click on my form settings, I can click on settings, and I can change who can fill this in. So that will define who that will actually go to, and we'll come back to that in a moment. I also have the ability to add multilingual versions of my form onto this single form. So by default, my primary language is English. If I go and add Polish into here, so I can select Polish as an additional language. I can add a number of different languages in there. Let's come back and let's go and preview my form. What I've got now is I have a language drop down in the top corner. So I can go and change from English to Polish. And what it will do out of the box is change all of the predefined text into the relevant language. But it's not changed any of the other aspects. So that's maybe a little bit pants, but there's things that we can do around that. Because if I come back to my multilingual settings and I click on the edit button next to Polish, I can edit the language. And so what I can do then is go through and translate each aspect of these questions into the relevant language. Now, this experience is flowing through into SharePoint as well later on this year, where we can have multiple languages on a single page within SharePoint, and we can just switch between them. So this is the first, I suppose, the first iteration of it. Now, I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to translate into Polish, but let's just say this is translation, and I could go through and do that across all of them. So I could go and do the same for the basic information, for the questions and the answers on my questions as well. So then when I come back, if I go and preview again and I change from here where it says SPS Warsaw feedback, let's change it. And so it changes to the translation. So you can have that in a number of different languages. So you can really truly make your a single form multilingual.
Matt, in between, there is one question from you.
Oh, sure.
If you're familiar with the tool that is called Mentimeter.
I'm not, no.
So maybe I'll try to answer this question, Magnus. So with forms, I mean, the biggest benefit from Mentimeter is that you see the results ad hoc. So like once they're submitted, you see the results. They're like changing so you can see who is answering. I mean, what is the answer ratio? And so with forms, it's a different tool. It doesn't show you the results live. I mean, you can see the results live, but you can't share the results with externals. So you could try to create a flow that on each submission takes the data and puts it somewhere so that you can share them like a Power BI report. But so forms is not an Mentimeter.
Cool, thank you for that. Yeah, so
there is also a second question from Christoph. Is Microsoft Forms set language automatically based on user profile language or browser?
It's as far as I'm aware, it defaults to English, and you can change the default language. Again, that's something that's probably worthwhile testing, because I've tried things in German, and it still, for me, showed in English, but that's probably because I've got various regional settings within my setup. So please do feel free to try that one and share that one with us. But if I come to my multilingual settings, I can change the primary language. So let's go for Welsh. So I could change it to the national language of Wales as the default language. I'm going to change that back to English before I forget, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to understand anything that's actually going to be on the screen. Okay, so now we've had a look at some basic information there. Let's just go and fill in some very basic responses to this form. And let's go for agree, and statement 2, let's strongly disagree to that. Next, and yeah, I'm not in any of the younger categories anymore, so let's go and submit. Okay, so I've completed my form. Let's click back. What you'll see up here now is that I have responses, and it says that number of responses I've got as 1. So I can actually, and you will actually see this populate in real time if you are sat watching the responses as people start filling this in. But what it will give me is a breakdown or a graphical representation of all my responses. So if I have a choice question, then it will give it me in a pie chart format. It will ask me, it will give me an average rating if I'm using ratings, and so on. It will give me a very graphical representation. Now, I think one of the things that you were looking for from Mentimeter is the ability to export that. So you can open in Excel, and so you can pull all the results out in that way. Or, as Tomasz correctly said, then you can take that and using Power Automate and flows to take that elsewhere and then do something else with that data. And we'll probably, if we get a chance, we'll see a little bit of that later. So let's have a quick look at sharing. Now that I've got a form created, I have some sharing options. I have who can respond to this. Is it only people within my organization can respond, or can anybody respond? Now, this is grayed out for me at the moment because it's because on my form I have the file upload control. Now that's because that's there, it's going to stop me sharing that with anybody externally. But I have a number of ways that I can actually share my link with my audience. So I can copy the link, and then if I go and paste that into my browser, it's a very, very long link. So if you can put it into a URL shortener, that's always a good idea. But that will take me to my form, and there's the production version of it. I can generate a QR code. So if I was to, as you'll see on one of the slides later, there'll be a QR code that you'll be able to scan, and then that will take you to some feedback forms. I can embed. So I can take the codes and I can embed the form onto my website or something else. And I can also instantiate an Outlook email, which is just fired up for me, which will automatically have a link to the form in that email for me. So there's a number of ways that's supported for me to go and share it. I can share either to get people to fill it in. I can share as a template. So I can create a link. And so if anybody else wants to create an exact duplicate of this form and then create their own, then they can take this link, and then we'll see this in a moment, and then they can actually go and create a form and copy it and then start editing it themselves. Or I have one way of collaborating available to me, which is the share to collaborate. Now, if I go and select share to collaborate, that will basically allow somebody else to come in here and also modify this form as well. And I've got a couple of options here. I have the ability to share this with someone with an Office 365 work or school account. So that might be I'm working with someone who's external, but I still need them to validate, come in with a username and password. Or I have only people within my organization can view and edit. So I can specify who can control this. So for this, I'm just going to jump across into another browser session. So this is my wife's account. This is Laura. And I'm just going to paste into here the link. Go and collaborate on the form. So now Laura has access to my form. And if I can come in here then and start adding some so I can actually add some modifications in there. If I come back across into my session, then we can actually co-author on the forms now, which is again quite a new feature. You just saw there that it came up with LW to say that she's the person that had modified it, and I can see without having to refresh in real time, I can see those updates coming through. I can also see who's modifying it in exactly the same way as I can with other Office products, who's in here and who's working at the same time. So that's really quite a nice way of being able to work together on with multiple people working towards the creation of these forms. Let's go back to Laura for a moment. And I'm going to go back to forms because even though I know that Laura has access to this form, it doesn't appear in my forms. It appears under shared with me. So these are forms that I have been shared with a sharing link from somebody else. But the issue that I have with sharing links or sharing those links is that I don't necessarily have the ability to control exactly who comes in to modify that form. Yes, I can see who it is, but I could send that or Laura could send that link across to multiple other people, and I have no way of stopping them from coming in and actually modifying my form. So really, this is one of the big use cases for having things as a group form, because then the permissions for that form actually come from the Office 365 group that are associated, that form's been associated with. If I click on group forms for a moment, then I have access to all of the Office 365 groups. Yeah, so I've got quite a few here, and down the bottom I have SharePoint Saturday. So if I click on my forms, it's not a clear and simple way of actually associating that. I actually need to go to more actions, and it took me a while to find that because sometimes that ellipsis is quite washed out if you've got a graphic. And I can go to move this form. Now this isn't obvious that this is what it's doing, but if I click on move, it will ask me to specify what Office 365 group do you want me to associate this with. So I can't see my SharePoint Saturday Warsaw one, so I'll click more and let's click SharePoint Saturday and then click to move. So that's now disappeared from my forms, but it's now become part of, let's go and find SharePoint Saturday, one form now. And I can now see that associated with this group is the SharePoint Saturday Warsaw feedback. So now I can just rely on the membership of the Office 365 group coming in and modifying this and working on and accessing the results for this form. I haven't got to worry about publishing or pushing out that sharing link to other people and therefore not having control over it. So that's a very quick look at forms. Quizzes, I will just touch on because the actual look and feel is almost identical. So let's call this Maths quiz. I add questions in exactly the same way. Notice that I don't have the same options, or actually I do have the same options here. I don't know how I'd actually use a Likert scale within a quiz, but there we go. But I could say, what is the capital of Poland? And let's go for Warsaw. And let's go for Warsaw, which is one of my local towns. And with a quiz, we're not just dealing with information coming in. I can specify what the correct answer is. If I want to put a response, then I can put some feedback in there as well. I can specify multiple answers, but I can also specify a weighting to the actual correct answer as well. So let's go and preview that and just see the slightly different end screen for this. So in this case, I have what is the capital of Poland. Let's go and select Warsaw. Let's hit submit. Let's go and view results. And it's telling me I've got 1 out of 1. I've got full score. So I'm happy I've passed this test. And it's giving me my response. So that's really quite a nice way of just being able to get some response back and actually get some scoring associated with it as well. So it's a little bit of gamification that you can build out. So very quick whiz around. A very quick whiz around what the quizzes are. Let's go and have a look at our forms integration and how it can be used elsewhere. Because yes, we can use it just as a data capture on its own, but we can also use it in a myriad of different ways, such as using it on SharePoint, using it within Teams, and using it within Stream to get to integrate and get information from other areas. So Stream is one of my favorite areas that is really starting to be integrated tightly with Microsoft Forms. First of all, let's go and have a look at Stream and see how I can integrate a form into a stream. Because when I come across the stream, I've got my transcript if I've got my video uploaded. But I've also got this tab here, which is called interactivity. Now, interactivity means that I can add a form into my video. So let's go and add a form into here. Let's go and, I need to paste the URL. So I'm going to go and grab the URL of, let's go and use Matt's quiz. Let's go and grab the URL that's associated with that. And let's take that to Stream, put that in there, and let's call that testing your knowledge. And I can add this in the timeline of my stream. So that could be, at this point, it's 11 seconds. If I want it at some other time, I drag my slider to where I want it to be. Not a very good place to stop my timer there. But let's go back to 11 seconds, which is a nice break. Oh, that'll do, 11 seconds. Oh, pause. And let's add it to the timeline. So you can see now that's there. So let's rewind a second. So my video will play when I press play. But then it will pause the video and it will load my form directly within the video to allow me to then go and I've already submitted a response to that one, but it would allow me then to go and answer a test, so I can get some feedback. I can then continue, and we can carry on the video. So that is one way that it works. But what's really cool is that I can also now bring the streams into Microsoft Forms itself. So let's go and look at a question that I have here. Let's go and look at the ability. We've seen this icon before when we added a picture to the header. But if I actually click it within a question, it gives me the ability to add a video. Now I can add a video and it asks me to provide the URL for the video that I want to bring in. That could be from Stream or it could be from YouTube. So let's go and grab my Stream link. Let's bring that back to Forms. Let's paste that in. Okay, because I've used Stream, it's saying only authorized users within the organization can use this video. But then I've actually now got my video, which is now part and parcel. Oh, let's mute me. Part and parcel of my questionnaire. So I can actually now build videos as part. This could be really useful for your testing. Build your video into the quiz, which is an awesome way of being able to get responses and feedback from your users whilst they're watching it. Let's have a look at SharePoint. So Quite often I implement forms for use on feedback for intranet. So how is the intranet doing? Is it good? Are you happy with today's menu? Whatever it might be, we can get that interactivity piece on SharePoint as well. And if I come and edit my site, Forms actually has its own web part. So within SharePoint, I can just press add, I can type forms, and then I have Microsoft Forms as a web part, which I can insert onto my page. And I can either go and create a new form, and then that will automatically take me out to back to forms, create the form, and will link it into my SharePoint page for me. I can also add an existing form. So again, within SharePoint, I need to actually provide it with the web address that for that form, whether that's for responses or whether I'm actually going to show results. So let's go back and let's have the questionnaire this time. So let's go and grab my Warsaw form. Let's grab share. Let's get my URL. Let's go and put that into SharePoint. And in this case, I'm going to collect responses. Yeah, so now I can actually have my questionnaire or my survey as part of my page. And this will actually respond if I pull it over into, I'm going to let me do that one. So let's make this a 2-column. So it'll actually scale it based on the amount of space that it's actually got there as well. So it's very, very flexible in terms of the real estate that it will use. Exactly the same type of interactions I have within Microsoft Teams. So I have in my team, I can go to add a tab. And again, I have Microsoft Forms as a tab that I can add within my team. So let's go and add one. Now, the experience of adding a form within Microsoft Teams is much nicer than it is within SharePoint, because what I can do is I can go and add a form, and it will show me all the forms that I actually have access to. And it will show me, well, it will show me the ones that are personally my forms. The ones that I haven't shared with anybody therefore appear as personal. Those that are associated with this Office 365 group will appear without the personal. Notice that I don't actually have the ability to add a form here that's associated with another Office 365 group. So, for example, if I was to go and add my SPS Warsaw feedback into here, I can add it in one of two ways. I can add it to collect responses, I can add it to show results, or I can add it to actually have collaboration on this within the confines of the team itself. So throughout the day, where you've seen other team sessions about bringing everything into one place for your users, we can do exactly the same with forms, even on the collaboration aspect. So let's say that I want to collaborate on this. So I can hit save, because my SPS Warsaw team are the people that are responsible for this, so they're the people that can go ahead and edit it. But what I want to quickly show is if I go and add another form, and I'm going to show you the personal one. So let's go and select Matt's quiz. Notice that I don't have as many options to me here. So if I don't have it set up as a group form, then I don't have the ability to allow collaboration within the confines of the team. All I can do is show responses or show results. So let's just show, let's just say show results on this one. Okay, so I then have the graphical dashboard of my results coming in and available to me through Microsoft Teams. So have we got any questions in chat at the moment on any of that stuff? Okay, so Tomasz is promoting the online SharePoint again. Make sure you definitely attend that. Okay, and it's been confirmed that forms inherits the language from the user context. It will also change on the SharePoint page. Perfect. Thank you for answering that for me. So awesome. Let's go back to my presentation. So one of the things that is rolling out at the moment is a much more intelligent approach to actually being able to create forms. And I was hoping I'd have been able to demonstrate this because throughout the context of the last 6 hours, I've seen this appear and then I've seen it disappear again. But what it's allowing us to do is, rather than having the entire copy of a form, it will use its own intelligence to understand that if you have a form that has a very similar name to a form that already exists, then it will give us the ability to select questions from that form to bring into my new form. So, for example, if I just in this case they're using feedback. This is on the Microsoft Forms blog, by the way, if you want to go and have a read more about this. Then you can select individual questions and they will be pulled into your new form. There's also a very nice new mobile experience coming through where you can edit and create your forms on a mobile device. There is no mobile app for this still at the moment. It's all done through the browser, but it's much more mobile responsive in that respect, and the actual question creation experience is much, much nicer. So it's worthwhile going and checking that out because that has rolled out and it's available now. So really, just to round us off, let's have a quick talk about Forms Pro. So Forms Pro is the premium version of Microsoft Forms, and this is the one that's really trying to compete with some of those third-party products that are out there at the moment, such as SurveyMonkey or any of the other premium products. But really, what it's designed to do is bring together some of the other Azure services, so the ability to do sentiment analysis on your responses, being able to track trends, being able to get overall feelings with regards, create word clouds based on answers. There's a lot more analysis that comes in because of that being using all of those Azure resources. There are more sharing options that are available to us. So as well as having the out-of-the-box ones, I also have the ability to include this in different ways. I'll quickly try and show this if I can. Very much improved dashboards. So it's bringing more of a Power BI look and feel to the actual dashboards rather than just the one graphic per question. But the key thing is it's not free. There is quite a small fee associated with it, and it's done on a per response basis. So you pay a set amount per month, and that gives you a set number of responses that you can receive through that Microsoft form. So very quickly, just to show that, before I break for questions. So this is Forms Pro. Looks and feels to start off with exactly the same as what normal Forms does. It does have the advantage of being able to use your environments if you're using environments within the Power Platform. But I do also have the ability to create a Pro survey, which really, Pro basically means I have more space to actually create my form. Why is that not created? I don't know. Let's go and look at one I created earlier. Let's try once more. Okay, so yeah, it gives me a little bit more real estate, so it is wider. I have more formatting options around what formats, what fonts, etc. I actually use, but I also have the ability to mark it for sentiment. So for example, with this one, I could be asking for an opinion. I want that sentiment analysis automatically made for me, and so therefore it will then process that using Azure Cognitive Services. The responses, a bit more of a dashboardy view, will give me an overall sentiment, give me a response. But when I said I had more options available for sharing, it also allows me to target specific individuals, which allows me to send these forms externally and actually record the person who comes in. So I can actually send these externally without being anonymous. So I can then track as those form responses come back in. Okay, so just to summarize then, so hopefully that's given you a good enough grounding about some of the really key things around Microsoft Forms. It's a very, very versatile little application, and I think it's very underrated for what it is. It's so simple to use for you to create forms and quizzes and then get that feedback and then take it somewhere else, or even just to do that very basic analysis on it. And it's so simple to get working that no matter what your level of IT literacy, you can really get going with it. And you can integrate it in a number of different Office applications. We looked at how we can take forms and put them into Stream, into SharePoint, and into Teams. And what we can do now is bring things the other way, and we can actually bring Stream videos or YouTube videos actually into our forms themselves. So that's it in terms of what I class as the hidden gem of Office 365. Are there any questions?
Hi, Matt. This is Sai. Have this requirement of designing a form where certain fields will be filled and approved by somebody, and then it will be passed on to the next person, so that they can fill in some more fields, and then they will pass it on to somebody else. So how do I do it in SharePoint and Forms?
Okay, so in Forms at the moment, it is basically one user per form. So you can do basic branching where you can, if someone answers one question, then it's going to skip a number of questions and then come to another part. But that one user will be expected to complete that whole form. If I was looking to try and do something like in that scenario where I'm going to pass maybe different bits of data capture to different people based on responses, then I'd be very much building that out in Flow. So taking let's say I've got a basic form with some basic responses. If they answer yes to one question, then I'm going to instantiate another form link and I'm going to send that to somebody else. So that's how you would, it's not quite as intelligent as that yet in Microsoft Forms.
Okay, thanks.
Any more? Because I'm conscious I'm the man standing between you and the and SharePoint.
You know, SharePoint can already it's already started for some of us. So yeah, there are no questions on chat.
Okay.
So
perfect. So, oops. So again, just if you do have any questions on any of that, please do feel free to reach out. I do answer. I'm not sleeping much at the moment. I've got 2 young children. So please do feel free to ping me questions and I'll answer most hours of the day at the moment. Or if there's anything that you want clarifying, if you want me to do a blog on something, then again, please feel free to let me know and I'll be happy to do that to add that extra detail. So please do feedback. The event has been fantastic. It can only get better, and this is your chance really to help us to understand how things can be made better, and particularly when we do this again, what worked, what didn't work, and so on. So please do feel free to fill that form in. If you haven't done so already, it would really be good to get your feedback. And once again, thank you to all of you to attending. Thank you for, I'm conscious that it's quite late. Thank you to the team again for putting this on. We do, all as presenters, really do owe you a debt of gratitude for still getting this going despite the current scenarios. And once again, really thank you to the sponsors for everything that you've done for us as well.
Thank you, Matt, very much. And now, anyone, if you'd like to join us, show yourself, have a chat, then feel free to click that hyperlink that I posted above to join the SharePoint. Thank you very much for your presence during the whole conference today. I hope you liked the topics. I hope you enjoyed the conversations, the questions, and all the interactions. However, if you were missing the in-person feel and touch, then hopefully in September, 12th of September, we'll do our best to meet in person in Warsaw for the 5th anniversary and just do it even better, having half year more to organize everything. So thank you very much once again. Stay healthy and see you in Warsaw.